This episode of Author Stories is brought to you by the Writing Mastery Academy. Founded by Jessica Brody, author of the best-selling plotting guide, Save the Cat Writes a Novel. The Writing Mastery Academy features online, on-demand writing courses, including the official Save the Cat Writes a Novel companion course, novel fast drafting, crafting dynamic characters, and productivity hacks for writers, to name just a few, plus monthly live webinars on various writing topics. Go to jessicabrody.com/Hank to learn more and get your first month of unlimited access to all the content for just $6. That's right, just $6. jessicabrody.com/Hank. You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Blind, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is... Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have Kate Quinn back on the show with me. We were just talking, and it's been a couple of years since Kate's been on, and so much has happened in her life and in publishing in that amount of time. So this is going to be a fun catch up for us. Her new book is called The Rose Code, and it is stunning and amazing. This is definitely a must-have for your to-be-read pile for sure. Welcome back to the show, Kate.
No, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. So, Kate, we were chatting just a second ago about, the pandemic and the craziness that has been 2020. And now, we're about to close out the first quarter of 2021. And hopefully the world is getting a little better. We've got some good news on the horizon. Thank God for a change. But I've been talking with a lot of authors recently about how this pandemic and the lockdowns and all of that have affected their creative process, because writers tend to kind of hole up in a room by themselves for a good portion of their career, and lockdowns you wouldn't think would have a lot of effect on people, but there's something that happens when the rest of the world is kind of locked down with you. What has 2020 meant for you, and how has it affected you?
I think for me, and this is by no means unique to me, I have discussed this with a variety of author colleagues who have felt similar things. For me, there was a certain dichotomy between a level of the fact of relief that we happen to be among the lucky people, those of us who are, in the sense, we already work at home, we already work from our offices. My daily routine changed very little from where I was pre-pandemic to where I was post-pandemic. The thing that changed the most for me was that I was no longer going out to the gym. I was working out at home before I would hole up in my home office. And for anyone who is already fortunate enough, like me, to be able to work at home, something for which I'm very fortunate, daily life did not change perhaps a great deal, but at the same time, it really was quite difficult to maintain some sort of creative routine in the middle of all of that. And I know I felt a certain amount of guilt, because there's a certain sense of, why do I have anything to complain about? There are many, many, many people who have it so much worse. The only real change in my routine being the gym. But at the same time, it is hard to fill that creative well when, the world is sort of on fire outside your window. And for myself, it was difficult to, finish all of my editing on the Rose Code, because I felt like I had the attention span, frankly, of a goldfish. So, trying to, get those edits done, make sure I put 110% of myself into the book the way I do with every book, not just a pandemic book, it was definitely a challenge, and it was one that, definitely was hard to meet at times. But on the other hand, I do think creative people have a little bit of an advantage in the sense that you do have an outlet in that we can time travel to other places through our work. And I know for me, when I did finally get to the point when I was drafting a new book again at the end of last year, really, though, everything seemed to be going so terribly on the outside. The pandemic numbers were worse than ever. The election crisis was in full throes. Everything seemed to be, absolutely on fire everywhere you looked. But I was diving into a new book, a new world, new people every day, and it felt very much like an escape. So in that sense, I also felt lucky. So it really was all over the place. I think it is for creative people as well as anyone else. And I think you really all over the place might just be the emotional mood for just about everyone in 2020.
So, Kate, you're an historical fiction author. You take an event or a time period in history, one that might be kind of the worst of circumstances, and then find stories of hope in the midst of those times. Do you think 20, 30, 50 years from now, people are going to be writing books about what we've just gone through?
They probably will be. And I don't think I'll be one of them, though. I think it'll be hard for the people I'm not sure if the people who lived through it are going to want to relive it, even in fiction, necessarily. I do think that's one reason why historical fiction continues to be popular, and it's specifically stories about the world wars, which I get asked a lot. It's like, why so much World War II fiction? I think it's comforting to look back at times that have been tremendously emotionally, pressurized and, tremendously difficult on a national stage, just as they have been in 2020. But look at the past and think, look at all of that. We got through all of that. We can surely get through this. I think that's some of the appeal in, looking at these stories of the world wars, in being able to think, we got through that, we can get through today.
Well, it's really interesting that when you're talking about world wars or big events like that, it really can become a galvanizing thing, because all of us in the world experienced World War II. I mean, for the most part. Now, we all had different experiences, but it's one thing we can all put our finger on and say, I know someone that this happened to, or, we're still feeling the reverberations of this event to this day. Is that one reason that historical fiction is such a resonating factor with so many of us, is because it is sort of a shared common history in some ways?
Absolutely. I would say that's very much true. And I think it's something as well that helps highlight common humanity, because I've heard a great phrase I remember at a conference, which was something like, the past is not just now with hats. And it is very true that, when you're looking at the past, you need to look at what are the different, moral codes, what are the different, daily things that make that time different from this one. Yet at the same time, we need to have the things that remind us that humanity is common, and that the emotions and motivations that drive us have remained very much the same, even across millennia, not just generations. And so that's, I think, one of the useful reminders of historical fiction, and a very comforting one, is to look back at the past and think, all right, these people dressed differently, they thought differently, they worshipped differently, but they are still driven by the same basic emotions. And, huge world events and, times of crisis bring those commonalities out like nothing else.
Kate, looking back over your back catalog and all of the books that you've written, you've always had your feet in historical fiction, but you have chosen to write in different time periods at different points of your career. I know you wrote a good bit of historical fiction based in ancient Rome, and now it seems that you are focusing a lot of your energy in this World War II period, this mid 20th century period. What is it about a particular time period that captures your attention and makes you want to focus on this period? Why do you single out a period of time when you're thinking about the work that you're going to be doing?
Well, in part, it's going to be driven by what kind of books do people want to read. And there is certainly an element of popularity that cycles around in historical periods. When I was first starting to write in ancient Rome, that happened to be one of the things that was selling because, Gladiator had come out. And then after that, it was HBO's Rome. These things had really made the ancient world a source of fascination, in the public eye in a lot of ways. And so people were, hungry for books in that time. And then, that sort of cycles out and, it'll be back. I'm never worried about the fact that, popularity and trends, always cycle around. And it's not to say that I write completely to trend, because I don't think it's possible for writers to do that. First of all, we write too slowly to be able to follow trends, which come and go, very quickly at times. But also, it's the fact that when you write for a living, you do have to consider, what is going to sell as well as what you love to write about. But no writer also, I think, can write what they don't love. And the fact is that I've always been interested in a vast number of historical periods. I have, dozens more historical epics in my back pocket I would love to write books set in. And it's just a matter of finding when is it the right time for that book, not just for myself, but for also the readers. Are there going to be the readers for it who want that book as well? And, but as far as historical periods go, what draws me to, anything that I love enough to write, whether it's on trend or not, is that it has to light up my brain in some sort of light bulb way. And what usually does that is it's either a historical event, a historical person or group of people who give me a wow moment, as far as, and quite often it's what women have been doing in the past, something that has been done that perhaps is not as well known as it should be. For the Alice Network, it was about, women spies in World War I. I'd never heard that story before. In the Renaissance Italy books, I was learning about, the possibility of women in kitchens and women in papal politics, and I was fascinated by that. In the Rose Code, it was women code breakers during World War II. So this is the kind of thing that I tend to be fascinated by. Overall, is enough to want to write a book about it, whether now or 10 years from now, is it some moment of women have done something spectacular, and I want to do a little bit to shine a little bit more light on that.
Are you looking for software that helps you bring your novel to life? Novelize is a web-based writing app which allows you to access your work on any device with a browser and an internet connection. Write from your desktop, laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Just get the novel written. Say goodbye to sticky notes. With our notebook on the side, you can keep track of all the important information you need to write your novel. We keep distractions to a minimum, help you track your progress, and encourage you to write more novels. You can even use the same notebook for your novels in a series. Outline, write, or organize your novel by switching between modes. You can write your outline notes while you're writing, and you can move scenes and chapters around anytime in the organize mode. Choose between the dark and light theme to help prevent eye strain so that you can stay immersed in your book. Novelize, the app for writers by writers.
Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web.
When you hit upon a big concept like women code breakers, okay, we'll just grab that for the Rose Code. How do you then start drilling down to find the story in that? They're great concepts. Women code breakers. Was this a thing? How did this work? And how come we haven't heard these stories? Well, if we haven't heard these stories, how do you then dig out the details that then make this fascinating story?
Well, for the Rose Code, it was really a plethora of material. It was almost too much because there was so much written eventually about Bletchley Park, not just the code breaking, enigma machines, how the codes were broken, daily life at the park, daily life at the home front, what it's like living under ration laws, under the threat of invasion, which seemed like a very real possibility. These are all things that factored in, and they're all things that have many thousands of words written about them. But the thing for the women of Bletchley Park was, it seemed to me that, you were starting to see more nonfiction about, what were the women doing. And I was very grateful for that. And there were memoirs, there were autobiographies written by women who had actually worked there, for which I was very grateful. But, the trouble almost was narrowing down this book to what story I wanted to tell, because, at its peak in 1945, there were 8,988 people working at or around Bletchley Park. 6,757 of those were women. That is 6,757 potential stories.
Wow.
And it felt like there were so many stories I could tell. It took me a while to try to figure out what story I wanted to tell. And, even so, it's like I do regret, some of the wonderful things that had to, I realized that will not fit in this book. I can't make this a book about that as well as this. And I do hope that there will be more stories about the women of Bletchley Park, because I do not feel like I in any way covered all of it.
So with that many stories, how do you narrow down and pick ones that you think are going to make a great story when there is a plethora of information, which is almost as bad or not worse as not enough information? To me, it would be difficult to write historical fiction about something that people could find out so much about. So how do you walk the tightrope of historical fact and writing an engaging story that's obviously fiction? How do you navigate those waters?
Well, I pared down to this book to realize I wanted it to be a book about two things. One, I wanted the reader to walk away with at least a basic understanding of not just the characters as people, but also Bletchley Park itself almost as a character in its own right.
Right.
And I wanted the reader to know by the end of this, really, how did Bletchley Park work, and how is it that, masses of encrypted information goes in and it goes onto this conveyor belt of intelligence workers, and then it comes out as decrypted information. I wanted them to have that understanding. So that meant then that there would need to be multiple women working, because women, when they worked there, you did not talk to even other people at Bletchley Park about what you did. You were only supposed to focus on what was right in front of you. So I realized that meant I would need a number of different narrators working at different points in the park's, chain on the conveyor belt. So that gave me something right away. And then once I realized I would need multiple narrators, I realized I wanted women of all walks of life, very different experiences, who become friends. And then it came from there that I realized I wanted it to be a story also of broken friendship. Because this is not a spoiler for anyone listening who has not read yet, but this story is, you will learn on page 1, you have 3 women who have not spoken in years. They all used to work at Bletchley Park together. They used to be friends. Something broke them apart. You don't know what. So it becomes a story of not just the fact that these women are pulled together after the war and they have to dust off these old code breaking skills, but they also have to confront what drove them apart and the fact of whether they can become friends again. And I liked that idea of sharing the commonality of what is a woman's experience at Bletchley Park, what is the intelligence, and how does it go through the park, through these women's hands, and come out into something that could change history. And then also at the same time, what is the human toll? What is the cost on these women? What is the cost in their relationships, their friendships? And how can that cost be borne in the years after the war when they have to pick up the pieces? So all of that came together and kind of organically came out of the research. And finally, it took some months, but told me sort of what story I wanted to tell with this book.
Well, and the setting and the time period and all of that are great set pieces. But like you alluded to, the real story here is the story of the friendship and whether friendships can last, and really the human condition, how we relate to one another. This is a story that could be set in 2021, in 1947, in 1812. I mean, the story of friendships is lasting and can be told on any set, really. And that's to me, that was the great part about this book. Yes, I learned stuff I didn't know, but this is ultimately a human story. And that's what historical fiction really needs to do, isn't it? It needs to root us in emotions that we could be feeling right now, or maybe situations that we've gone through or will go through, yet, and see this played out by people that are far from who we are. Those things kind of root us together in our humanity, don't they?
They do. And I think that's, really the best kind of time traveling. It's not merely taking you to another time within the pages of a book. It's placing you in another set of shoes and making you think, maybe you thought first when you met, so these women on the page, well, boy, they're different from me. But then by the end of the book, hopefully you're thinking, they're not that different from me. I too can remember when I had a friendship that broke up and that I wish I had handled better. I too remember a time when I quarreled with a friend and it had terrible consequences for both of us. I too remember a job that stressed me out so much that I thought I would go nuts because it was so hard. These are still, even if we're not breaking codes in a war and knowing that, ships may sink or sail safe because of the work we do on shift that day, we're not doing that. But we can remember, when you strip it down even further than that, we know what it's like to have some of these other experiences, friendships that go wrong, romances that are ruined because of secrets, jobs that, have a terrible, emotional toll because they're so difficult. These are the things that, are commonalities for all of us as humans.
Absolutely. So tell me about the three protagonists that you chose for this story, because thousands of people that could have become characters. What was it about these three characters that intrigued you? And when you're thinking about the story and how it would go, what went into kind of assembling your cast?
Well, as I said earlier, I really wanted, women who would be able to work in very different places in the park, so the reader would get an understanding of how the intelligence moves through. So at the beginning, I decided I would have, three women who work in three very different but very critical places in that sort of assembly line at Bletchley Park, which really was, like a big, intelligence factory. And, at one stage, one of my women is a cryptanalyst. Those are the, the top brains whose job it is to literally just fling their minds against this wall of code and try to break it open just enough that the code breaking machines have a chance of cracking it the rest of the way. So I knew I'd have a cryptanalyst. And then I knew I would have one of the women who works the code breaking machines, the big famous bomb machines. You've probably seen those images on The Imitation Game, the whirling drums invented by Alan Turing. Those machines were all maintained and operated by women. And, that was hard, tense, dangerous work, but it was very important. You needed 110% accuracy all the time to make sure that, those machines could crack the ciphers the rest of the way open after the cryptanalysts were done. And then after that, once the machines had this, had the ciphers cracked, they could decode the intelligence. And then it was passed on to women with language skills, translators, because, intelligence came out in German or Italian or Japanese. And then it would be passed on frequently to women with language skills who would translate it out to recognizable English that could then be passed to British intelligence. So I knew I would have a translator there. So those were the 3 jobs I picked. And for the women I chose to fill those jobs, I usually chose either women who were very closely based on historical women or who were composites of historical figures. Mab, who is my tart-tongued shop girl, turned code-breaking machine operator. She was one of the women who operates a machine. And really, she's only chosen because she has, first she's recruited because of secretarial skills, and then she's recruited for to work the machines because you need to be tall and to get to the top of those 8-foot machines. So they are short a person one day and they ask for the tallest girl next door. She's 5'11". So it's literally that easy how she gets recruited. And that kind of thing did happen at the park. So she sort of is a symbol of the worker bee women who could fill any number of slots just simply because they had attention to detail and were sharp as tacks. And then I have my cryptanalyst, who is named Beth. She does not start out a cryptanalyst. She doesn't even have much of an education. She's a local village girl who is already written off as a spinster at 24 and has lived her whole life really convinced that she's stupid and she doesn't have anything to offer except to be the daughter at home looking after her parents. And when Bletchley Park ends up recruiting her, she realizes that her lifelong facility with crossword puzzles and patterns actually has a very important secondary purpose here, and she can put that to very good use. So she becomes really a star code breaker for the team at Bletchley Park, and one of the people who really does the very hardest work of cracking the ciphers open initially, which was, really, I still find quite inexplicable no matter how many articles I read about it. So that's Beth, who is very much based on some real historic women who did some absolutely astounding work. Her name was Mavis Lever. She was just a 19-year-old university girl who became one of the best cryptanalysts at the park and was on the all-female team that cracked the Italian naval enigma and handed Britain the biggest naval victory since Trafalgar, which was the battle off Cape Matapan. So that was how I got Beth's character. And then for my third one, I have Osla, who is a debutante, Canadian-born heiress, and is recruited to the park because she has excellent finishing school German. And so she becomes a translator for the secrets that have already been decoded. And someone like her would literally be reading Hitler's telegrams before the prime minister or the king get anywhere near them. And, well-informed has nothing on the women like this. They were literally the first ones who were seeing this information in any kind of, readable form. So she became my third girl, and I really loved making these women out of composites of real people. She was also very closely based on a historic translator named Osla Benning, who was Canadian-born, a debutante, and a translator at Bletchley Park. And like my Osla, she is the wartime girlfriend of Prince Philip, who at this point during the war is no one has any idea he's going to be royal consort. The princess herself, Elizabeth herself, is only about 13 when the book starts. He's just a rather ragged young naval lieutenant trying to make his mark, and he happens to be dating a code breaker who he dances with all night in London when he's in town. And she gets on the train after that and goes from London back, the dawn train from London back to Bletchley, and saunters back into work to start her morning shift, probably still in a cocktail dress. So history dropped that in my lap too, so I could not resist putting that in.
That's so fascinating. Kate, when you're writing a book like The Rose Code, with so many details and so many little character details that really make these characters come alive, and then of course the backdrop of all of the historical events that happened and very real things we can put our hands on, it would seem to me that you would approach this in one of a few different ways. Either you would read as many sources as you could find, and then work on character sketches and all of that, and do a lot of pre-writing before you started the drafting, so that as you're drafting the book, all of the work that you had done ahead of time just kind of informs what you're writing, because it's coming out of what you've already done. Or maybe you're the kind of writer who drafts and then when you come to something that needs to be filled in, you leave yourself a note, and I'll fix that later in editing or whatever. Or maybe the type of writer who, as she comes to something that needs to be filled in and really worked out, that you stop the drafting, research that, and then come back. Which camp do you fall into? Are you a prepare ahead of time, edit afterwards, or in the midst, or have you devised a different way?
Not to be unhelpful, I think I do a bit of all three. I do try to do as much prep in advance as possible. I did, months and months and months of research on this book before I began drafting. And I do a lot of work on, trying to make sure I do some outlining. I do, work on the character sketches, what is motivating them, what is going to be, the historical, things that tie into their personal storylines. And I do as much of that in advance as I can, but no one can do everything. So I do then hit the roadblock sometimes, where sometimes it is something that you can't go on with. Can't go on writing unless you have stopped and researched something. So in that case, that's what I do. But on the other hand, there are times when it's flowing along and I can just put something in brackets like insert historically accurate dinner menu here, or, find extant London restaurant for, characters to be going on a date on in October 1942, and, put that in here later. So sometimes you do that as well. I suppose it's whatever the moment requires.
I love that. Being prepared for any eventuality is great, I think. So Kate, as you finish up this book, I know that you said you were drafting something new at the end of last year. When you tackle a subject so dense and so exciting as the Rose Code, how do you then decide what to focus on next?
Well, that was a little easy for me. I already knew what I wanted to do next, and because I'd found a really, really incredible story that was so big and so beautifully, popping right out of history right at me, that I didn't feel like there was anything else I could write. And there was also the idea too that I knew this one was going to be a bit simpler than the Rose Code, which was something that really appealed to me, because the Rose Code was a big, complicated book to write and to research. So the idea of something which had a simpler, narrower scope really appealed to me. And so it really fell right into my lap. I knew exactly what I wanted to do next. My publisher loved the idea, so I just went off to the races with it in fall. And that ended up becoming the story of history's most lethal and famous female sniper, who was a Russian girl who was operated during World War II. Mila Pavlichenko, her name was, and her nickname was Lady Death, which I thought was just absolutely hair-raising on so many levels. And the thing I really liked even more than that was that, this woman was a single mother, an aspiring historian, a deeply nerdy grad student, a total book nerd. And then, all she wants is to, go be a library researcher, when she grows up, essentially. And then Hitler invades Russia, and she has to think about a different path. And what she ends up doing is going to the Red Army and, becoming a sniper, racking up an eventual tally of 309. And if that wasn't, fascinating enough, she was sent on a goodwill tour to America in 1942 and meets pretty much everybody who's famous. And then also, becomes, such, excellent, really great friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, of all people, So I was just thinking, a first lady and a sniper, literally becoming pals. I can't do any better than that.
That's a story that's just begging to be told.
It really was. And I really wanted to tell that story. And also, I was lucky enough that Lady Death herself wrote her memoirs later in life, so I had the best of possible sources. You know, at this point, it wasn't so much of a thing as with the Rose Code, where I had 300 plus books to tell me about what I should do. Here I have one really fabulous detailed memoir, and I have some other books too, but I have the memoir, and that really tells me so much, and it helped streamline the research process so much, because I knew this was a story of one woman rather than three, right. One very narrow focus of a war rather than this huge sprawling intelligence factory to cover, and I had this I had one really fantastic detailed source on this material rather than a whole library of them. So all those things together helped me pick the next book, and it really did flow very well.
Well, I can't wait to see that. But in the meantime, everyone needs to go grab their copy of the Rose Code. It's available everywhere now. We're going to put links to it in the show notes of this episode to make it easy for folks to find, whether you like to read old-fashioned paper or with your Kindle or listen to audiobooks. You can grab the Rose Code any of those ways. We're going to put links to it there. Kate, if folks want to dig into all the amazing stuff that you're involved with, where can they find you online?
Oh, you can always find me on social media, procrastinating from my daily word count. I'm on Facebook. You can find my author page at Kate Quinn Author. I'm also at Kate Quinn Author on Twitter. And I am at Kate5975 on Instagram. So you can find me anywhere you pretty much find social media. Although I am not on TikTok. I refuse. I'm not a teenager.
I don't blame you. Kate, this has been so much fun catching up. We're going to send everyone to grab their copy of the Rose Code. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
No, it was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me back.
Authors, if you're looking for a partner to help ensure that your book is the best it can possibly be, look no further than Pico's House. Crystal and her staff make a conscious effort to be critical yet courteous. They also strive to make the business side of things run smoothly so that you can rest easy knowing that your manuscript is in capable hands. Whether you need beta reading, developmental editing, a manuscript critique, line editing, copy editing, or proofreading, Pico's House is the one-stop shop for you. Check them out today at picoshouse.com to get started. Dream Author by Sophie Hannah is an immersive 14-month coaching program for writers at any and every level of experience, and also for those of you who want to write and are just waiting for the right encouragement and guidance to get you started. Your writing dreams should make you happy. For so many of us, our dreams are not a source of happiness. Instead, they cause us stress, guilt, frustration, and even shame. Here's the great news. All of these feelings are natural and all writers experience them. The problem, though, is that when your writing dreams bring you more anxiety than joy, it affects your resolve and your productivity, and you end up not taking the action you need to take in order to propel your dreams in the right direction so that they can stand a strong chance of coming true. That's why Sophie created the Dream Author Coaching Program, to teach anyone who is passionate about writing how to change the way they build, think about, and pursue their writing dreams in order to become their own most powerful ally and advocate for the rest of their writing life. And more great news, once you've learned that skill, it lasts forever. Visit dreamauthorcoaching.com to get started today. The Bad Company Complete Series Omnibus, Books 1 through 7. Humanity's Greatest Export, Justice. Space is a dangerous place, even for the wary, especially for the unprepared. The aliens have no idea. Here comes the Bad Company. The Bad Company Book 1, Colonel Terry Henry Walton takes his warriors into battle for a price in this first installment of The Bad Company. He believes in the moral high ground and is happy to get paid for his role in securing it. Set in the Cutherian Gambit universe, Terry, Char, and their people humans, werewolves, were-tigers, and vampires form the core of the Bad Company's direct action branch, a private conflict solution enterprise. Join them as they fight their way across Tissakinnon 4, where none of the warring parties were what they expected. The 7-book series omnibus includes The Bad Company, Blockade, Price of Freedom, liberation, destroyer, discovery, overwhelming force. Grab the complete Bad Company series by Craig Martell now. How to Be a Badass Witch by Michael Anderle. Virtutus Gloria Mercies. Translation: Glory is the reward of valor. Fed up with playing the normal game, recent university graduate, ex-cum laude, ex-soccer star, ex-popular and mostly broke Cara Madano changes her life when she decides to research how to be a witch, and believes it. Cara didn't want to go back east and deal with her overbearing mom, so when university was done, she stayed behind in Los Angeles. Little did she realize how controlling moms can be from the other side of the country. Feeling a little desperate to make her own way, she buys a few books on business, and one on a lark, How to Be a Badass Witch. That's when the trouble started. Find out just what trouble a young woman can get into when the magic just might be real. How to Be a Badass Witch by Michael Anderle.